Why does smoking look so good on screen? And before anyone comes at me, I'm not saying smoking is good. I'm not saying you should do it. The health stuff is real and documented and not what this video is about at all. But if you have ever watched a film or an anime or scrolled through a fashion campaign and noticed that something about a character lighting a cigarette just looks effortlessly cool, you're not alone and you're also not imagining it. That reaction you have is not random, it did not happen by accident, and the story behind how it got there is genuinely one of the most interesting intersections of psychology, media, fashion history, and cultural storytelling that I have came across. So that is what we are getting into today. Less of a health conversation and more of why does our brain work like this conversation? Because honestly, I think understanding how perception gets built around something is way more interesting than just being told what to think about it. So let's start at the beginning because the history here is actually wild. In the early 1900s, smoking was not inherently glamorous. It was just a thing people did. But then something shifted, and cigarette companies in the early to mid 20th century started doing something really calculated with their advertising. They started attaching smoking not just to a product, but to an idea, to a feeling, to a type of person you might want to be. And depending on who they were selling to, smoking was positioned as sophisticated, luxurious, masculine, feminine, rebellious, a sign of status, a marker of freedom, and different campaigns for different audiences, but all pointing towards the same psychological trick. If you associate a product with something aspirational for long enough, the product starts to carry that aspiration inside it. And then Hollywood arrived and did something even more powerful with it. Actors like James Dean were photographed and filmed with cigarettes constantly, and these were not ordinary people. These were the most glamorous, magnetic, aspirational figures of their entire era. So, in the minds of millions of viewers watching those films, a very specific and very subconscious connection started forming. Cigarette equals that person, and the person equals everything I find compelling and desirable about them. That connection did not disappear when the films ended. It got stored somewhere in the cultural imagination and passed down through every decade of media that came after. And media just kept reinforcing it. Think about the films you have watched. Think about the characters who smoke on the screen and what they tend to have in common. They are usually the most interesting person in the room. They are rebel, the mysterious one, the creative one, the person who does not quite fit and does not care that they do not fit. The character with the most emotional depth or the most complicated in a world. Smoking became a visual shorthand in filmmaking, a way to communicate something about a character without using dialogue. It signals nonchalance, a kind of controlled detachment from the chaos around them. They are not frantically reacting to the world, they are just existing in it slowly on their own terms. And cinematography makes this worse, honestly. The way smoking is filmed is generally beautiful from a purely visual standpoint. The the light catching the smoke, the slow exhale, the way it gives a character something to do with their hands that reads as thoughtful rather than nervous. The whole thing is composed to look cinematic because it is, and directors know exactly what they are doing when they frame a shot that way. And anime does this especially well if you have noticed. And some of the most aesthetically striking characters in anime history smoke. And it is never accidental. It is always communicating something about who that character is, their complexity, their wariness, their cool indifference to what everyone else thinks. And now here is where the psychology gets interesting. There is this concept called the halo effect. And basically what it means is that when we find someone admirable or attractive, it unconsciously transfer those positive qualities onto everything associated with them, their mannerisms, their style, the way things they carry, the way they move. So when someone you find deeply compelling does something, your brain does not evaluate that thing independently. It absorbs it as a part of what makes them compelling. The behavior gets coded in the qualities you already admire about the person. Apply that to the decades of the most magnetic actors and musicians and fashion figures all being associated with smoking, and you start to understand why the image is so sticky. It is not that cigarettes are inherently cool, it is that the people we decided were the cultural definition of cool kept appearing with them, and our brains made the connection and filed it away as a fact. There is this also something called associative learning at play here. which is basically just the way our brains build links between things through repeated exposure. You see something enough times next to something else, and eventually your brain starts treating them as related. Fashion campaigns, music videos, films after films after films, and the association get reinforced so consistently that over so many decades that it stops feeling like a constructed idea and starts feeling like just the way things are. The fashion industry has its own complicated relationship with this whole thing. There is a specific aesthetic that has lived in high fashion for a very long time. The idea of effortless cool and the person who is stylish without appearing to try and who exists in their own world and does not seem particularly invested in your opinion of them. Controlled detachment is honestly the best way to describe it, and smoking fits that aesthetic almost too perfectly from a purely visual standpoint. It gives someone something to do that reads as unbothered. The slow movements, the slight distance it creates, in editorial fashion and creative industries, it became almost uniform for a certain kind of person. The punk scene, grunge, rock culture, all of these subcultures that built entire identities around rejecting mainstream expectations adopted smoking as part of their visual language of rebellion. And those subcultures got absorbed into mainstream fashion as they always do, and the visual language came with them. There is one more thing worth talking about here, which is the reality versus the perception gap. Because here is what is actually true. None of the qualities that get attached to smoking through media come from smoking itself. Confidence is not in the cigarette. Mystery is not in the cigarette. Style is not in the cigarette. What actually reads as cool in those film characters is the emotional complexity, their self-possession, their indifference to approval, their sense of existing on their own terms. The cigarette is just the prop that got repeatedly placed next to those qualities until it became a symbol for them. Which means the interesting takeaway is not about smoking at all. It is about how powerfully media and repeated cultural exposure can attach meaning to something, how an image gets constructed over decades until it feels like truth, and how our perception of what is desirable or aspirational is so deeply shaped by what we have been shown again and again without even realizing we were all being shown anything at all. And that is worth paying attention to, not just because this topic, but about everything we absorb from the media we consume, the aesthetics we are drawn to, the qualities we associate with success or coolness or depth. A lot of it was constructed somewhere by someone for a reason. Understanding that does not make the images less beautiful, honestly. A cinematic shot is still a cinematic shot, but it does make you more aware viewer. And in a world that is constantly constructing images designed to make you feel something, being an aware viewer is actually kind of powerful. So to bring it all back together, smoking does not look cool because there is inherently anything cool about it. It looks cool because for over a century, media, advertising, fashion, and film made a very deliberate and very consistent decision to place it next to every quality we find aspirational. Mystery, rebellion, sophistication, freedom, emotional depth, and our brains, being the pattern recognizing machines that they are, absorbed all of it and filed it under fact. And it is one of the most successful and long running examples of cultural image construction in modern history. And honestly, from a purely analytical standpoint, that is kind of fascinating.